I saw them uh, not support certain groups of people that were there for whatever reason or agenda they had. I don't know.
Say more about that.
We really feel like there's a lot of us who feel like, and I hate to get into any kind of political bullshit about it, but that the group in Waveland, because there was, they had their own issues. They were perhaps ready to move as well. But the group in Waveland, the Rainbow Coalition, REMA, who is doing a fantastic job feeding the community over there, that was the only place you could get a fresh vegetable or a salad or anything else. And it was also the only place that you could go and be entertained by, extremely ebullient, excited, bubbling, happy people. And, they had yoga there. They had dome tents set up where you could go in and hang out. They had a health clinic, a distribution center. And the people who came down there and were working with them were very, very encouraging and enthusiastic and fun and wacky. And I think it was a big eye-opener for the community. I think a lot of people were shocked and disturbed initially, and they grew to love them completely. All the old rednecks talking about the damn hippies, and they just were in tears when they left. They did a wonderful job, and the reason that they left is, partially internal, but FEMA really got in there and pushed them out. And the rumor that we heard was there was another group that was more associated with higher profile and more, not necessarily government, but that wanted to use that space, and no one actually ended up doing it. But their reasoning behind it, FEMA said, we are shutting down the feeding centers because we want locals to start shopping at the grocery stores and start regaining their lives and start, infusing the local economy with money again and everything. But there weren't any grocery stores open, and the only place you could shop was Walmart. And it was not, the timing was bad. It was not a viable thing for them to do when they did it, and it was very unfortunate. And we lost them. They went to Chalmette. I'm unaware. I don't know if they're still set up there or not. But it was a shame because they left in December, and they were greatly needed long after that.
Tell me what it was like in Hancock County versus Harrison County. If you could explain briefly how those, for someone who doesn't know that area, how the shape the two of those were in and how they were different.
Harrison County, where Pass Christian and Biloxi, and I'm not good to speak to that. I didn't spend very much time anywhere except Pass Christian, and I know that the Burners Without Borders spent a lot more time in Biloxi, and when I visited their camp, I was able to sort of see the kind of shape that Biloxi was in and have a look at it, but I can't speak to what the politics or what the situation was like. I know that in Ocean Springs and then in Pass Christian that things were greatly affected physically in the same manner that they were in Hancock County, but I really wasn't very familiar with politically what was happening.
Well, what kind of shape was Hancock County in December?
The programs of you have the steps of relief and recovery, and the recovery phase. I wouldn't even say. I mean, I'm certain that, of course, things have begun to be more classified in the recovery phase, but it was still, immediate relief was still needed so much for so many people. It wasn't even begun to get addressed. I mean, I can't tell you how many houses hadn't even been opened, how many people hadn't come back. Schools being opened, it was quite ghostly there still, very gradually things like the train started to come back and supplies started to come down, but I can't even fathom what the demolition process is going to be like continue to be like there because there's a lot of problems with some unfortunate federal laws that with the Environmental Protection Agency that has a very small lack of verbiage that would make it, in a situation like this, quite easy to go in and tear everything down. But right now, I don't know if they've been able to pass that bill or not, but right now every house supposedly had to be certified asbestos-free before they would allow anyone to go in and demo it. And this was an extremely time-consuming process. And
hold that thought for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me when you first went to the town of Pearlington and what shape it was in after the storm.
I went to Pearlington early on. I went in October, and it was a complete wreck. And it was black. There was no, they had been in the dark ever since the storm. There seemed to be no movement as far as bringing in any kind of electric poles. Nobody had a FEMA trailer. People didn't get their FEMA trailers there for ages. Rumors were flying rampant. There was very little leadership. Reverend Fields, I think, was one of the only ones who was sort of organizing community-wise. Nobody knew what was going on. Nobody knew what was going to happen. Pearlington initially had been a community that a lot of people had moved to after they were displaced in the early 60s from the land that the Stennis Space Center took over. So there were, this is a community of is it 2,000, 3,000 people? And they were all completely clueless what was going to happen. They were hearing rumors that the town would be razed and they would be moved again. And everyone was really, really frightened. And a lot of people stayed in Pearlington and a lot of people came back. And I remember arriving there and just seeing completely confused, lost individuals walking down the street, not knowing what to do. And fortunately, the Pearl Mart started, and other people know a lot more about that than I do. But finally, I believe it wasn't until November that they had the town meeting that about 300 people showed up at, and they said, we want to put your minds at ease. The fire department was there, their council members, the clergy leaders, and they said, the town is not going to be torn down. We will start bringing electricity and FEMA trailers and things there. But it was a really scary, really sad place in the beginning because it felt very hopeless. And I think another rumor was that they were going to just tear it all down and build casinos there, which I think that was a rumor in Biloxi as well. And I think people were extremely demoralized. And it's also a very remote place, really. It didn't have the same kind of infrastructure that there was in other parts of Hancock County, Waveland and Bay St. Louis. And so people couldn't connect with each other as easily either. And they came back very slowly, but the ones that had stayed there, they were extremely, extremely demoralized. Yeah, it was very sad. That town needed a lot of help.
So it was around this time, sometime in the fall, that you first made contact with the folks over in Biloxi. Tell us how that happened.
I had been working with a group that came from New York and was driving back and forth to New Orleans a great deal in that week. I think I did 3 times in that week. And the third time when I was driving back, there was a young woman at the on-ramp to get onto the highway to Bay St. Louis, and I could see that she was making a sign, and I pulled over and asked her where she was going, if she needed a ride, and it turned out to be the wonderful Kathy, and she was heading to Biloxi to her camp, which was the Burners Without Borders camp, the Temple camp, and which I had heard of, which we had all heard of, that they were doing good work over there. And So, of course, I wasn't going to dump her in Bay St. Louis. I drove her to Biloxi to her camp that night. And that was the first time that I had been there and made contact. And I was actually ecstatic because I went zipping into the temple and got to meditate, which was very